I was a junior at Fordham University at Lincoln Center in Manhattan. I grew up, in New Jersey, just across the river, seeing the World Trade Center all the time. We would go there, school trips, things like that. It was just always there, and it was just the fact that it wasn't there. Just sort of, even though we literally saw it and we saw it gone, and we could, smell the smoke and see the smoke, it didn't process. You would go down there and not see it there, and you would just be confused, like, what the hell is going on here?
I heard it on the radio. It was actually Howard Stern, so I didn't think it was serious at first, but within a matter of minutes we knew it was serious, and the Sentinel wanted to send someone up there. We got a team of 4 of us. The first thing we did was actually charter an airplane at Orlando Executive Airport, because you got to remember back then we didn't know how big this thing was. Then they canceled all executive flights, they canceled all commercial flights, and we just got in a van and started driving.
I remember I was at a post office downtown Orlando. I was on a mission to get stamps. My wedding invitations had to go out that day in order for it to be in a good time frame to get people to RSVP. And there were a bunch of people standing in line, and you could tell slowly people were getting word that something was going on. People started asking the people at the post office if they could turn on the TVs.
I was a junior in high school in San Antonio, Texas. It's an all-girls Catholic school. And we, start hearing the news reports about, the towers being hit, and it's like class just stopped.
Sitting in my 3rd grade classroom in Jupiter, Florida, and there was a school-wide message sent out over the loudspeaker. The school was encouraging parents to pick their kids up. But I do remember after school we went to my grandparents' house, and just kind of the jarring scenery of the black smoke coming out of the building, and wondering if the building itself was going to come down, or really what was happening.
I was at home renovating my house, and my wife came into the bathroom I was working on and said a plane flew into the World Trade Center, and I said, no way. Pretty common reaction, right? So then the newsroom that day obviously was in overdrive, and was for several days. We sent reporters up to New York, and then 4 or 5 days later, I was on the Orlando International Airport opened up, flights resumed, and I was on the first flight out of Orlando to New York.
Pretty much the roads were all blocked off. You could just walk straight down the middle of 5th Avenue. There were people you could see sort of, gathered, almost like, it reminded me of like what people said about Pearl Harbor in World War II, just people sort of gathered around car radios and listening and things like that. By the time you got down to Canal Street, like the smoke was like right in front of you.
And through the window I could see the smoke still coming off the World Trade Center, and as it grew dark and I taxied into Lower Manhattan, the heavy spotlight cast on the smoke and the scene was an unforgettable image.
Remember, there was a missing persons center set up at the Lexington Armory, and I went to go talk with people there, and there was a line of people looking for loved ones, and it started over here and it went around an entire city block. Thousands of people waiting to report loved ones that were missing, most of whom ended up dead.
It was just the dread that anybody whose face was on a picture like that, please call home, tacked on a tree or taped on a building, that person was no longer with us.
They closed all the bridges and all the tunnels, so everyone who was in Manhattan on 9/11, they were stuck there for a few days. So we had some people crashing on our couches who were they were at work and they couldn't go back. One of my roommates, his father had been in the World Trade Center and got one of the last elevators down. He told that story just nonchalantly around 5 or 6 o'clock, just saying, yeah, my dad was in there. His boss said to grab an elevator. He went and washed his hands first, and then he got on the last elevator down.
So I was kind of just depending on, what my parents explained to me about, what was happening. Terrorism wasn't a word I grew up with.
Hearing that many people dead is not something that, at that age, you really can wrap your mind around what that means.
You think you don't want to interrupt people when they're grieving, but people want to talk. They want to tell their stories of how special their loved ones were, and I would listen to those stories all day, and you'd do your job as a professional, then you'd get back to the hotel room and turn on the TV and somebody would else tell a story and I'd fall apart.
Yeah, that was about as hard a story as I've ever covered, and I was in the thick of Katrina and other stories where the professionalism of being a journalist takes over, you're doing your job and all that stuff. But you get a minute to take a break or afterwards coming home, and the sorrow and the sadness really struck home in a hard way. I remember just now as I'm talking to you that taking the bus to the airport was a long, hard ride.
You know, I worked on the coverage of it to put it in the newspaper the next day, but I feel like the images will never be out of my mind. The stories I won't ever forget.